Welcome to our first webinar on Examples of Excelencia 2016. My name is Andres Quintanilla. I'm the Program Manager for Examples of Excelencia. Before we begin, I'd like to mention a few programming notes before today's presentation. Well, at the end of the webinar, we'll have the opportunity to open up for questions. If you would like to ask a question that was not answered during the presentation, please use the questions section found on the GoToWebinar control panel on the right of your screen to submit questions at any time throughout the presentation. If you have any technical problems during the webinar, please contact Michelle Santiago, whose contact information that I sent earlier via email. She is available in the chat as well in the control panel. Please limit your technical questions to the chat and your program questions to the questions section. Now I would like to introduce Deborah Santiago, COO and Vice President for Policy of Excelencia in Education.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this first webinar for Examples of Excelencia for 2016. You know, for us, this is kind of a Examples of Excelencia 101. This is intended to get you started thinking about giving you an overview of Examples of Excelencia, what it is, why we're doing this, and then a little bit of information about the process, from nominations to profiles to the way that we actually select the finalist and the Example of Excelencia for the year is identified, and then an expansion of what we're trying to do here at Excelencia in Education, and that's to provide a little bit more technical assistance than we have in the past to help programs tell their story in a succinct way, but in a way that resonates with funders, with decision makers, and that can help support the important work you all are doing to ensure Latino students are served well. And that's kind of the agenda we have for this webinar, and we're certainly going to leave time for your questions, and hopefully we can answer as many as possible. So, starting off, what is Examples of Excelencia? Excelencia started this effort now 11 years ago, and still 11 years later, it's the only national effort to identify and promote practices, evidence-based practices that are improving and accelerating Latino student success in higher education. And we're focused on 4 areas: associate level, baccalaureate level, graduate level, and community-based organizations. And we added community-based organizations 2 years ago with the full recognition that it takes communities as well as institutions and programs to support the success of our students overall. So, why did we start Examples of Excelencia? It's important as you think about your potential nomination and profile to understand a little bit about what went into this. We really wanted to bring attention to programs and efforts at institutions that were making a constructive and asset-based difference in Latino student success. A lot of our conversations in DC and elsewhere were very deficit-oriented, and we heard a lot of people say they wanted to serve Latinos, they didn't know how or what worked. And so we created this effort to identify what was working and share it with others and leverage opportunities and also talk about Latinos in an asset-based way. So for us, this is a really important. It started as a campaign and has evolved into a more significant initiative. We also wanted to provide resources for those who are committed and wanting to serve Latino students to learn from each other and to be a network across the country in ways that we can support the work of Latinos and other students that are making a difference. Third, I will say, you know, we would often find people who had lots of excuses for not serving Latino students. They didn't know what worked in access or in retention or transfer. And we wanted to address the no excuses for action, which means if you want to find what you can do in access, here are programs that are making a difference, or in transfer. Last 2 points about why we started Examples 11 years ago is that we know it's really important to be intentional in your investment for Latino student success. There are many students who do well without support or strategy, but that's can be more rare than we would like. So being intentional and inclusive of Latinos in your effort is really important for us, and we wanted to be explicit about the need to include Latinos and make sure they're served well with data and with practice. And then, not insignificant, Now, we want to celebrate the programs across the country that are making a difference and increasing Latino student success. It's a way of leveraging, but it's also a way of saying good things are happening across the country, and we need to make sure we are aware and celebrating it, whether you're an institution or program, or you're a president, or you're an elected official, to know what's really making a difference. A little bit about our impact. So as I said, this is our 11th year. So we collected data as of last year, 10th years. Since 2005, when we started, we've had over 1,300 programs nominated from 30 states, DC, and Puerto Rico. So this isn't just in important states like California, Florida, and Texas, amongst others. We're seeing Latinos are enrolling in institutions across the country, communities, they're represented in communities across the country. So to have this kind of representation is really, really important. Whether it's a mature or an emerging community, we're seeing significant effort and impact in serving Latino students. And we started in 2005 with 3 nominations, and last year we had 265 nominations. So there really has been a growth in awareness and attention, and that's important for you all to know, because we have the ability to give some leverage and awareness at the national level for the kind of works that you all are doing in your programs and institutions across the country that we want to share. And to have that kind of nomination shows the wealth of effort going on. And then I guess the last thing I'd say is that, we are really paying attention to the need to not just recognize and celebrate, but opportunities to leverage the recognition of being an example of Excelencia or a finalist or even being nominated, so that these effective programs can get an increase in funding, they can get some attention within their institution. Often we found effective practices are working with 25, 30, 40 students, and sometimes the president doesn't even know that this effort is taking place at an institution. So the ability to leverage that is important, and find additional support for the important work you all are doing is also an important characteristic for us. Having said that, let's just jump into the process, and I'm going to hand it over to Andres, who can give you a little bit more information about how we go about in the examples process.
Great, thanks so much, Deborah. So we're going to go over the examples process. So I'll talk about the important dates, how you go about nominating a program, how you go about submitting a profile, and how programs are actually selected as examples. So make sure to mark your calendars for 2016. We opened up our nominations on February 1st. The nomination deadline is April 4th. On March 28th, we'll be hosting our second webinar on how to tell your program story, where we'll explain the characteristics of a strong profile. Profiles are due by April 25th, but you do not need to wait until April 25th to submit your profile. If you're ready beforehand, feel free to go ahead and hit submit. Examples culminates in our annual Celebración de Excelencia held on September 21st, where we recognize the finalists and 4 programs selected as Examples of Excelencia. The following day, on September 22nd, we host our Accelerating Latino Student Success, or ALAS workshop. This is pretty much a day full of networking with higher education professionals, where everyone shares strategic information, best practices, and first access to new resources. All of this and any updated information on our fall events will be available at our website. That's at excelencia.org/2016, and that's kind of our central hub for examples. So any quick information that you need about examples can be found, on that webpage. So let's just get right into the nomination process. All the forms submitted for examples are done through our website. Again, you can go to excelencia.org/2016. There you can click a banner that reads "Click here to make a nomination." This will direct you to a form that asks for basic information about you, the nominator, and the program you are nominating. The information you need to nominate a program is the name of the institution or organization, the program director, and their contact information, including email, mailing address, phone number, all those basic things. You'll be asked to pick one of the 4 categories, as Deborah mentioned earlier, that the program belongs to, either the associate, baccalaureate, graduate, community-based organization. You may nominate a program that falls under any of these categories, and you can nominate programs that target high school students or students not yet in institutions of higher ed, as long as the program focuses on success in higher education. You'll be asked why you're nominating the program, and we want to know what do you think stands out about that program, how they serve Latino students, and why you think they deserve to be recognized. And we'll quickly move along here to the profile process. Again, this is all done through online forms. So once your program is nominated, the individuals listed on the contact form will be sent an email with instructions on how to submit their profile. If your program is nominated, the email will contain a link to the profile submission page, as well as a copy of our examples completion guide, which we'll discuss a little later on in the webinar. The online form to submit a profile will again ask for basic information about the program director, as well as the 5 components of the profile that I'll quickly go over in the next few slides. So this will include the issue area, a description of the program and its history, the program staff and budget, goals and mission, and evidence that shows that the program works. So as you can see here, these are the 5 issue areas Excelencia uses to describe programs. When programs are selected as finalists or examples, they're entered into our what we have online. It's called our Growing What Works database. It's a great tool. It's our online searchable database that includes all the active programs that we've ever recognized through examples. They're either honorable mentions, finalists, or examples themselves. Issue areas are used by Excelencia to narrow the scope of programs and categorize them within the database. So a program can be described as an academic program, access, transfer, retention, or support services. And we completely understand that programs can touch on multiple issue areas, but we ask that you try to pick one program that one issue area that best describes your program. Profiles are read based on the area you select and how it relates to the evidence of effectiveness that you provide us. So to better accommodate programs and just to make sure that there's better alignment within your profile, we may decide to change the issue area just based on the data you provide. In our second webinar, we'll actually discuss a little bit more about the 5 issue areas and go into further detail about that. So now that you've selected your issue area on the profile submission form, there will be 4 additional sections where you have to enter more information or narratives about your program. Each section has a character limit, and character limits include both spaces and letters, so it's important to provide succinct responses in these forms. I know that many of you can write plenty about your programs and talk about how great they are and all that, but we want others to learn about your program, so we want you to focus on the highlights or the critical parts of what you're accomplishing. When developing your profile, we recommend entering these sections in a separate Word document and copy and pasting your responses to the form when you're ready. There's no way to save your progress within the form, and the web page itself can kick you out, so we would definitely recommend you saving your profile in a separate file just so you can refer back to it. And this first section of the profile, the program description, you'll explain the overall purpose of your program, why it was created, what services you provide to students, and how your program has evolved since the beginning. And in this section, there is a 1,500 character limit. This next section, the staff and budget, there is a 900 character limit. Here you'll provide the roles of essential staff members and their credentials. You'll share your most recent budget and, if possible, the cost per student. We'll also ask that you describe your source of funding and any plans that you have to continue funding.
And just to be clear, when we say most recent budget, we're just asking for a total amount. We don't mean that you submit your entire budget to us. It's just how much is it costing you. That's just want to be clear.
Right, exactly. Thank you. In this third section, there's a 1,000 character limit. Here you're going to explain basically what it's asking, the program mission and your goals. What we're really looking for here is intentionality to serve Latino students. So it's not just enough to have Latinos in your program. It's really important to intentionally serve them. So the goals you list should be attainable, and you should show evidence that you're able to attain those goals in the next section. I'll actually turn this over to Deborah so she can discuss this a little further.
Okay. Thanks. So one of the reasons that Examples of Excelencia stands out nationally is the importance of showing what works and how we know what you're doing is making a difference. And often that's a challenge. I know we work with programs that fundamentally, you know, are working because you talk to students and you have wonderful testimonials of success and impact. And that's really important. But we have found over time, you know, the aggregate of testimonials are not data. And the ability to put in quantitative and qualitative information can really be helpful for those who are trying to compare and contrast institutions and trying to get a handle on understanding why your program is having the impact it is on the students you're serving at your institution or in your community. So evidence of effectiveness is very important, and it's something that we are stressing. We have a character limit of 2,000 here because we want you to give that the time and attention. We know when we work with elected officials and funders that we try to send out to support program strategies and efforts, they are really looking for some concrete evidence of effectiveness. And that means using some kind of metrics. It could be as simple as the number of students served or their progress in a course or in a program offering, or it could be something like graduation rates. And it's really important that we also pay attention to how Latinos are performing compared to all students. What we have found over the years, very few programs solely or exclusively serve Latinos. It's that amongst those they serve, they know Latinos are doing as well as or better than others. And that's important. And one of the only ways you know that is by disaggregating your data. And that's an important leverage point for examples of Excelencia, because we often hear people say, we want to educate all students, which is important, but with educational attainment gaps, we don't know that the work we're currently doing is necessarily serving Latinos well. The way you know that is by disaggregating your data and making sure we're seeing the impact with this population amongst all of those that are being served. And again, there are multiple strategies and approaches to do that. You want to make sure you have evidence that's authentic to the work that you're doing. And, you know, I will say we have some samples here of metrics that we have culled over the 10 years of examples. Many of these metrics don't require, you know, that you pay an outside evaluator lots of money. They don't require regression analyses and these areas. It really is, can you show in a way that is authentic to your program impact? And whether it could be, you know, the pre-post tests, which shows value added of the intervention you've provided. Maybe it is retention rates as opposed to graduation rates if you're an access program. Maybe it's pass rates on licensure exams or students' GPA. Or completion of a certain number of credit hours. There are very manageable ways to talk about evidence of effectiveness that don't require lots of resources. We know many effective programs would rather spend an additional dollar on serving their students and not just paying for evaluation. So balancing a good amount of evidence with important programmatic work is what we're trying to emphasize in our Examples of Excelencia strategy. So I'll take it the next step, which is looking at the selection process. Andres shared with you kind of a little bit about the nomination process, which requires very little information except for some contact information and why you think it's of value. The profile process, which is a little bit more in depth, but I think still manageable for most of us, that gives us some understanding about the program practice and evidence of effectiveness. We take all of that information, and as Excelencia staff, we read every single profile that we receive and try to whittle that list of profiles to about 15 to 20 finalists. And I'm going to share with you in a minute the kind of selection criteria. This is not rocket science. We have this available now, and you can see in your profiles, but we want to make sure that we are consistent in our reviews and ways that we can identify a set of about 20 finalists, about 5 or so in each of the 4 categories. And I can tell you every year this gets more and more challenging for us as staff because there's some very good work going on across the country, and we're very heartened when we read it, but it also makes it hard to choose amongst and between them to put together a slate of finalists. But we do our best to make sure that we can do that and bring attention. And then we have an outside selection committee. Excelencia and education staff do not select the Example of Excelencia for a given year. We have a committee of colleagues and professionals in higher education that review the finalists and amongst them select the 2016 Examples of Excelencia, one in each of the 4 categories that we recognize. In some ways, it makes it a little bit easier for us that we don't have to narrow, we can just narrow it down, we don't have to select. So here's a set of the selection criteria. And again, this comes from research and years of looking at this, and what makes a difference for Latino students, and what can we find ways to measure and track. And one is the scale and the need for the program services. Why is it that you're putting this in place? Is there financial stability? Meaning, has your program been in existence, at least 3 to 5 years? Or is it something that you just created? If you've just created it, that's wonderful. We want to know about it. But I will say we tend to lean more heavily to programs that have been around for at least 3 to 5 years, because the assumption is you've got some external support, you've got some funding that can maybe institutionalize efforts after some time, and it's not as on shaky ground. The other is, do you have a record of improving Latino student success, retention, completion, enrollment in some way, and quantitative and qualitative data? Do you have leadership that's committed, and do you have a network of other partners that might be involved in supporting your strategies and efforts? And do you have cultural competency in what you're doing to make sure that of all the students served, there is awareness and attention of the strengths and challenges that Latinos face as they enroll in higher education and complete? Those are significant for us, and we've seen gradations of this in some of the practices that have had impact over time on Latino students. With that, let me hand it back to Andres to talk to you a little bit about what we do in terms of recognition to bring attention to the work that's making a difference.
Thanks, Deborah. So, yeah, we definitely try to bring more attention and make an effort to leverage the good work that these programs are doing. We try to promote these effective practices through a number of ways. As we mentioned earlier in the webinar, we have these 2 fall events, Celebración de Excelencia and our ALAS workshop. During Celebración, all programs that become finalists are publicly announced and recognized, and the 4 finalists that are selected as the example in their category receive the following, which you see on your screen now. A $5,000 financial contribution that they can use for any aspect of their program. Each examples representative will be invited to participate in a panel discussion at ALAS, where they'll talk about their program's practices and what works for Latino students in their area. We'll also pay travel expenses to attend Celebración de Excelencia and the ALAS workshop. Admission to Celebración is free for everyone, and but registration for the ALAS, there is a registration fee for the ALAS workshop. For the examples representative, this will be waived. The program's profile will be featured in our 2016 What Works for Latino Students in Higher Education compendium. And the profile will also be included in our Growing What Works database. As I mentioned earlier, it's our online searchable database. It's great. It's a great tool for institutional leaders, funders, policymakers, and others looking for programs that use effective practices to accelerate Latino student success. Finalists also receive a few things. They'll get a certificate of recognition, a discounted registration for the ALAS workshop. They'll also be recognized at Celebración de Excelencia, and their profiles will also be featured in the compendium and in our Going What Works database. So this kind of brings us to how we're able to help programs develop their profile. So given all this information that we shared about examples and what we're trying to do to promote these evidence-based practices, Excelencia developed 3 components for technical assistance. So the first being myself as a program manager, and then 2 other components, a completion guide and a webinar. These are used as tools. So I'll go over the completion guide first, then details on the webinar, and then we'll post my direct contact information so you can reach out to me. So the completion guide for this year, we developed this as a resource to answer our most frequently asked questions. We also provide samples of profiles and some more information on the metrics that Deborah was mentioning and how you can use them in your program story. The guide's meant to be used as a reference tool to answer these basic questions and to provide some insight into those metrics. and it's a good quick resource if you're not able to get a hold of me directly, and if you absolutely need your answer immediately. The guide, as I mentioned in the process, the guide is emailed to the nominated programs, but it's also available for download on our profile submission page, as well as a web page for technical assistance that we'll be sharing later in the week. Our next webinar is scheduled for March 28th. This is the Telling Your Program Success Story. So if you haven't registered already, please go to edexcelencia.org/2016. Again, that's that central hub for examples. And what we'll discuss in this webinar is a little bit more detail about the profile process and basically the different characteristics we look for in a profile. So for those of you that were looking for more details about how to come up with a strong profile, or how to include more metrics into the narrative that you're providing us, please make sure to join us for this webinar. It's pretty beneficial. It's going to talk a lot about metrics and how to talk about your program success.
And we can bring in examples of.
And yeah, definitely have examples, and we may have a member from the selection committee joining us to give some feedback as well. So here's my contact information. You can contact me directly, aquintanilla@edexcelencia.org. You can also use examples@edexcelencia.org. I'm sorry that's not on the screen, but that's also a quick, easy one to remember. And this is our direct office line, and my extension is 1104. So let's just go over these next steps. If you have not nominated a program, please do so already. The deadline, as we mentioned, is April 4th. If your program's already been nominated, then feel free to start working on that profile. You can wait until after the second webinar just to see what information we're looking for, and hopefully that'll help you further develop the profile you already have. And just try to share with others within your network this opportunity that we're trying to recognize all these programs that accelerate Latinos across the country in higher ed. You can do this through social media. You can tweet us if you're proud that your program was nominated or you want to let others know. Make sure to tweet us. Use hashtag Examples16. Our Twitter handle is @edexcelencia, and you can find us on Facebook at Excelencia in Education. And again, please make sure to save the date for the second webinar, Celebración de Excelencia, September 21st, and ALAS, September 22nd.
And those are both in Washington, D.C.
Correct. So try to get those flights down here, because there's some deals going on right now.
Right. So we try to be succinct, and we know there are varying levels of interest and questions out there. So what we'd like to do is to see if we could get our colleague Morgan, who is on with us, to take a look if you've submitted any questions, and also if you've thought of some now that you might want to ask us, feel free. It doesn't just have to be about the basic process, the examples 101 we shared. If you have more in-depth questions, we are able to answer those. If you'd rather wait and reach out to us independently, you can do so as well. But we try to leave plenty of time for you to ask us questions. So Morgan, do you have questions available that you'd like to share with us?
I do. The first question is, what if your program is curricula-based and it also provides transfer?
So actually, I'll answer that if you don't mind. So that is great. Curricular programs are essential. You know, I think the choice is, do you want to refer to them as an academic program or as a transfer program? We've seen several examples where they do both. I think we want to leave it to your discretion. I do know we are more likely to get programs that speak to academic support and effort than we do in transfer. So, you know, sometimes there's a look at where we have few programs nominated, and we take a little extra consideration there. And I know transfer is a very critical topic, as is retention, to be honest. So I think we'd want to leave it to your discretion. Which do you think of the two areas it really falls into? But I do think that transfer has a little bit more distinction as we look to ferret out between programs.
Great. And our next question is, can we provide attachments with data and graphs?
I can answer that. So you can't provide any graphs in there. So you're actually when you copy and paste the graph into the form, it won't translate very well. The numbers and the labels and everything will get pretty scrambled. So when we receive it on our end, we won't be able to read it. What we kind of want you to do is to provide more of a narrative of what it is your program is doing. Some folks before have provided links, and there's no guarantee that we'll actually follow those links in the profile. If we need more information, we may follow the links that you provide us, but for the most part, we're looking strictly at the narrative and the profile that you provide us with in the forms.
Right. I think, and part of this is to provide some balance as well. I know it's a real challenge sometimes to be limited to the character numbers, but some people want to attach brochures and information that's already been aggregated and that looks really nice. But we're not able to do that universally. Imagine 265 nominations. We just don't have the capacity to do that. So for us to be fair to those who don't have that information, we prefer to focus on what is submitted through the webinar and through the website and those strategies.
Okay, our next question is, how is scale defined? Is it the majority of students who need the service or support?
So that's actually a really good question as well. Scale generally refers, from our perspective, into the numbers that are served. And we have had some amazing programs that serve, 10, 15, 20 students. Often at the graduate level, they're serving less students. And we've had some amazing programs serving, hundreds of students overall. In fact, a couple that served thousands of students. It does become a challenge for us in reviewing it, but what we're looking for is alignment from program goals and activities with the scale and the numbers of students served. And then honestly, we do take a look at the total budget, again, not the specifics of a budget, but to get a sense of what the cost is and what the investment is for the numbers of students that are served. So I will say, we intentionally call these evidence-based practices, not best practices, because we don't presume that the programs are necessarily replicable or scalable. We would hope so. And for us, scale is, can you serve more at the quality that you're currently providing? But what we're really looking for is how many students are you serving, and is it aligned to your goals and your activities in a way that aligns with the evidence of effectiveness? That's really more important to us.
Is there a possibility for community-university partnerships where the Latino students are in the community and not necessarily university students?
So I would say yes. We've seen this with community-based organizations. The community-based organization is working with students to help make them college ready, and in some cases we've had the students enrolled at a nearby college, but the services are provided at the CBO, and that's definitely acceptable. Part of the challenge, I think, for some community-based organizations is looking at metrics. We shared with you kind of 14 metrics there amongst others we've seen, and making sure you have evidence of effectiveness about your program, even if it's not an institution, is important. And so, for example, you might not have a graduation rate or a persistence rate. Maybe you do if it's year over year and you've got a cohort of students at the CBO. But I guess that's a long-winded way of saying, yes, that is acceptable. The presumption is that you are working assertively to address Latino students overall, with the aspiration of them going to college and being successful. So we are kind of more targeted at that area. We're not so much focused on the K-12, not because it isn't important, but we've had to really narrow down so that we can compare and contrast across programs and efforts.
Okay. And that's also not to say that we haven't recognized programs that have students in K through 12, but those programs generally focused more, as Deborah was saying, at the high school level and getting kids into college or allowing for access to higher education.
Are there any restrictions on how the $5,000 award can be used? And is it awarded directly to the program for use or to the institution to decide?
Well, there's no real restriction on how the money can be used. but it's meant for the program itself. So the funds, it really depends on where the money has to be funneled through so that it can come to the program itself. But that money's for the program, so not an individual or anyone else.
Right. So we've had different manifestations of that. For some institutions, they ask us to cut the check to the institution, and then the institution disperses it as need be. Others have had the foundation, a foundation that works with an institution as the recipient of the funds, with the understanding that that's the foundation that funds the efforts at the institution anyway. But we don't give the money out to any individuals. There is no stipulation. We don't ask you to report back what you've done with the money. I know in talking with those who've received the funds, sometimes they use it for their students, to have events or T-shirts, or sometimes there's parking or other areas. We know the hard work that's involved, and sometimes having general operating support to do your work can be a challenge. So we don't put any stipulation. We don't ask you to report out. It's considered a donation from Excelencia to the programs. We fundraise every year to be able to raise the money, the $20,000 that we give out to the programs themselves and their travel. So there's no stipulation on our part once it's received, other than it can't go to an individual, and we're going to trust, because we ask the program to tell us to whom we should write the check, to which entity, not an individual.
Okay, I have a question about category for fit. It says, we train teachers in multiple disciplines at multiple community colleges to teach by utilizing Latino literature and provide mentoring and counseling. I'm not sure what category we fit into, but we are a nonprofit.
So that's great. I would say you're probably, it should be listed under a community-based organization effort. It sounds like you're doing really important work to get students aware and given voice and connected with academic rigor by using Latino literature and such. But if you're not based in an institution of higher education, I think for us, we would consider you part of a community-based organization. And if you said you're a nonprofit, that's probably even more clear. That's not a requirement, but that is generally what we receive. So I would say submit as a community-based organization, and then under the issue areas that Andres articulated of the 5, I imagine that there's a certain amount of academic program support there. Again, you don't have to be an institution of higher education to provide academic rigor and support. And without knowing your program in detail, that sounds like what it would be.
If there are several programs on our campus that primarily serve Latino students, do we nominate each program or the institution?
You would just nominate the program itself. So we don't actually recognize institutions. We recognize programs within an institution. So we just, as I said, we recognize that program as the example or a finalist for the work they're doing on their campus, in their state, and in their community.
Right. We do go out of our way. We of course mention the institution or the organization, even if they have more than one program. And we've in the past made sure to let leadership know that this effective program is on their campus. We've had presidents come to DC as well to celebrate this. We've had programs that have been recognized with other state efforts, and they mentioned that they've been recognized by Excelencia. So I would encourage you, if you have multiple programs that you think are doing an important job in serving students well, to nominate them. They get into our system and our approach, and we do try to find ways to bring leveraged attention to them. And for us, that's at the program level. As many wonderful institutions we haven't seen one institution that's getting everything right in serving our students, and that would be our aspiration. So please do nominate the program itself. And you are not penalized for having more than one nomination from an institution. We have had that in the past. The distinction is looking at the evidence of effectiveness.
Okay. I have a nonprofit organization to help students to continue their education after high school. We also have a mentor program to help students with college applications, essays, and scholarships. Do I qualify for examples?
Yes, you're serving students in higher education. You're trying to help them. You're excelling them in higher ed. You're getting them there. You're supporting them throughout. So, I mean, that's definitely one of the programs that we're looking for, and we'd love to hear more about it.
I think the challenge we face with some of those programs is the ability to articulate evidence of effectiveness.
Right.
And again, that's not to denigrate the important work that's being done, but can you articulate how your programmatic efforts have had an impact on students? That's why we try even things that seem simple, like pre and post tests, meaning, can you do a survey of your students before you implemented your program and after, and asking them, their awareness about college or opportunities, or filling out FAFSA or getting financial aid. And then if you can survey them after you've done it, you at least have some data that can be useful and significant. Because I will say that part of it for us is that's why we're going to continue to provide technical assistance. Getting that kind of way of telling your story in addition to the students that you've impacted is really an important effort, so people can understand the context of what you do. So we've had wonderful, powerful nominations before of programs that are community-based and are making a significant difference for individual students. And the ability to show us evidence will just make your profile that much stronger.
Can we focus on first-time in-college students, or must we look to Latino students college-wide?
So you don't have to look at Latino students college-wide, but you do have to look at Latino students. So if if you cannot disaggregate your data by that additional race ethnicity category, you can nominate. It puts you at a slight disadvantage, because I think part of what we're trying to bring awareness and attention to is that there are intentional practices that are making a difference for Latino students. And many Latino students are first-generation college goers, and so we would not turn down a nomination. We think that's important. We often find people will nominate, say, a percentage of their overall students who participate are Latino, and they don't necessarily have their evidence of effectiveness disaggregated that way, but they know in terms of participation what that profile is. That's acceptable, but I will say the stronger profiles tend to have also the breakdown of evidence by race ethnicity. And again, it's not that only Latinos are served, but amongst all of those served, you have a sense of how Latinos are doing. And for us, that speaks to intentionality and tracking students, and sometimes going back and improving what's gone on if you see these students that are not doing well. And on the other side, and Andres is seeing this increasingly, there are programs that have been successful in serving a small group of students, not campus-wide, that gets considered and institutionalized so they can serve more students. And that is actually a success. The program doesn't remain as it was. It might have originally targeted Latinos, but it serves all students who are there. And that's something to celebrate as well.
Can we use FTIC longitudinal cohort tracking data?
Wowza, yes. If you have it and would like to share that, we have had several programs that have done that, and I will say that that's a rarity, but very powerful to be able to show longitudinal data of the students served by a program and its efforts. That's not to say that you're penalized if you don't have it, but part of this is our ability to celebrate and tell that story. And I think the better your data are, the more powerful story you can tell, and therefore the more we can help you as you try to leverage your efforts to serve more students.
Okay, we have one final question, and it's, will we have access to the PowerPoint following this presentation?
Yes, we actually recorded the webinar, and we'll also have a PDF version of the slides that we'll share with everyone. I think I mentioned earlier that we're going to have a sort of like a technical assistant webpage, and I'll share that link later in the week. But if you absolutely need this now, feel free to reach out to me, and I can email you everything that we have.
Great. Thank you. And I just, before we move on, as we're going to be wrapping up here soon, I want to emphasize something that Andres said too. You know, this is a community of common cause and effort, and we really appreciate you listening into this webinar. We hope you'll continue with us, reach out to Andres, and however we can be helpful. But you know, it's important that we celebrate as well. We try to fundraise to help support some of these programs and bring attention when we talk to funders and to elected officials. But you know, Celebración de Excelencia in DC is very powerful. It's free, anyone can attend, and to see the impact of that recognition and awareness at the nation's capital is really important. And it shows you're not alone. So think about the dates that Andres shared, September 21st and 22nd, to be a part of something that shows the common cause you have as an individual in your campus that you can be a part of. So why isn't that doing that? Okay. So, yes.
Thanks, Deborah. And yeah, I would definitely agree. Last year was my first celebration, and it's very powerful just to see the efforts that all these programs do across the country.
We had over 300 people there,
right,
celebrating. Yeah.
I apologize if we weren't able to get to everyone's questions. If you did have a question that went unanswered, feel free to reach out to me again. My contact information is on the screen. We also were able to log the questions, so anyone that might have had a question in the control panel and that we didn't get to, I'll try to reach out to you individually. As I mentioned again, we'll have that web page. I'll try to send an email to everybody that attended today with the link to that site. It'll have our PDF slides, the webinar recording, and we'll go ahead and include the completion guide on there as well. And then will also be linked to register for the next webinar. Again, that'll be for March 28th, and that's at 2 p.m. So that concludes our webinar for today. Thanks everyone for joining us. Please be sure to support Excellence's efforts by sharing this opportunity with others through social media. And again, feel free to follow up with me. And we look forward to reviewing more of your nominations and profiles for Examples of Excelencia 2016. Thank you.
Thank you.